So this is kind of annoying because I just made this video, but it was over the time limit, um, so it wouldn't upload. Um, so I guess I'll just try to talk about the same things again, but faster. So the first thing I was talking about was that, oh wait, so I'm a day shy of 11 weeks on T, so that's where I am. Um, the first thing I was talking about was my last couple shots, which didn't really go well because once I, you know, put the injection in, I had a really hard time pushing the syringe down and pushing the T out. Um, and that was really problematic because I had to like try like 4 times 2 shots ago and still wasn't sure everything got out. Um, so I talked to the nurse and she said that the needles were the same size, but I really think they have to be smaller because I even um, tried it again with like these other syringes she gave me and it still would not work. Um, so I started using a bigger needle, which it worked fine, so I'm assuming that was the problem. And I moved from giving my injections in my side to like my upper thigh because it was leaving like a little bit of a discoloration on my stomach and I um, didn't want that to get worse. So another, well, I guess I'll talk about changes first. There haven't been a ton of changes lately. Um, my partner said that my jaw looks a little wider, my face looks different. I mean, I still think I look pretty similar to how I've been looking, but I think there is some maybe subtle changes. The hair on my face is also growing faster. Um, more like sideburn, like fine hair is continuing to come in, and where like facial hair would grow. And also like my torso, like on my sides, it's filling out a little more, so there's like a little less of a like this shape. Like not that I was ever that curvy, but just looking a little bit more like up and down, which is cool. Um, Still waiting for my voice to drop more. I started my transition when I did because of a kind of a practical reason. I mean, besides that I wanted to, was that I'm in counseling and I'm starting an internship in the fall. So I was hoping that I'd have like enough changes by then that clients would like perceive me as being on like a gender nonconforming, maybe transmasculine spectrum or masculine spectrum. Because I didn't want that to be like happening in the midst of like when I'm working with them and having therapy sessions. So I hope like in a month maybe something happens with my voice and like my face or whatever, um, to look um, a little bit more masculine. Um, let's see, something big that I've noticed that's more of like maybe an emotional kind of ideological thing is recently I have been having, or like I guess like a month ago, I started feeling like really attracted to the idea of lesbians, and that was like really confusing for me and like kind of concerning because I was like, oh my god, like is this like for myself? Because I've always identified as queer and found like all of these like binary identities like a bit problematic. Not that people shouldn't identify as them, but like a part of a system that I found problematic. And so it's like, why am I like really attracted to this like idea of lesbians all of a sudden? Um, and I think like for me in transition, like there's a big fear in like moving to this heteronormative space and being perceived as um, you know, um, like a man or like in a heteronormative relationship or is like not queer anymore. And that's like not really something that feels like emotionally or like ideologically or and like relevant to me in any sense or politically. So I think this was like, an emotional reaction to that and feeling like, lesbians are this like they're very clearly like queer relationships and like I think for me that will always be really attractive and like figuring out how to maintain that in transition. And I think that's gonna really change my relationship to like my comfort with femininity, as I look more masculine, really embracing that feminine, feminine presentation so that I still get that like queered and blurring element that I like that's really gender nonconforming. Because right now, like, and I was talking to my partner about this, like wearing like really traditionally masculine clothing, like before, like prior to starting tea or to really like passing is, you know, a much more subversive act and like really is comes across a lot differently than male-bodied people wearing the same clothes. Um, so I think like as I progress and transition, my like what I'm attracted to in terms of what I wear, how I carry myself and present myself, and not carry myself so much, is gonna change. Like because I've always like really appreciated being in this queered, deconstructed, um, ungendered space. So that's something I've been thinking about a lot. Thinking about how to preserve queerness in a visible sense. Let's see, what else? So my mom was here visiting last week, which was like a pretty anxiety-inducing because we had been so tumultuous, and her saying like being so opposed to transition and wanting to like not be a part of my life and all the religious stuff that was coming in. But like before she came, she had sent me this email with some YouTube videos of like these songs that were pretty supportive and hopeful. So I was like, you know, I didn't really know what to think, but I was nervous about it. And we had like an overall pleasant visit, but we did have a couple conversations about transition and queer things that, you know, while they were like fine conversations, were like a bit upsetting to me in terms of where she was coming from. And she talked a lot about, she was like, asked me when I decided that I didn't want to be with a man. And, you know, for me, it's just like a bit of a frustrating question. I mean, you know, she's coming from a space where she doesn't understand like variance in sexuality and also like that a very binary like sex gender relation. So it's just really hard to have those conversations, and I think that I like did kind of go off. And she, you know, she always says like she's fond of saying like, you know, to be with a woman is like the easier route. And I don't think a blanket statement can be put on something like that. You know, and so, you know, I was like, you know, there is like, the differences in like these roles that like society puts on us and not even like what are the differences. She's like, no, well, actually, physically there are differences. And I was like, well, that's like male and female, not like man and women, which are very like constructed gender roles. And like, you know, I don't really know that this was like a useful track for me to take the conversation in, since my mom is like coming from an environment that's very socially conservative. I mean, not very socially conservative. You know, she's a pretty progressive person, but you know, she lives in a suburb and she's very Catholic, and you know, she's an immigrant, so there's all of that. Um, but so I don't know about all of these like deconstructed ideological things if they're helpful, but it was really helpful for me to say where I was coming from, like even if that didn't hold much relevance for her, because like there is a substantiation to the way I look at things, and like it is like a very holistic, like political and emotional and social perspective, and um, you know, I think even though it's hard to have those conversations because it feels like we're not speaking the same language, like it's something that's very important to me to be able to get out in some sense. Um, that like where I'm coming from on all of this isn't even like, oh, and like I should be a man. Or, you know, I just like don't even believe in those categories in general. And you know, she has this perspective that in religion about like men and women coming together and have being this combination where they learn things from each other and being really ideal in a certain sense. And you know, I think that's a lot of socialization because I don't think those categories are inherent. Um, and that masculinity and femininity aren't attached to bodies in the way that society has set it up to be. But anyway, so I kind of went off on all that. And also she talked a little bit about like me not, she was like, you know, the people that I know that are trans, basically she was saying, she was like, it's not that many, but they're not recognized in like, if you're trying to get recognition, they're recognized in um, not in like good ways. And like I don't, I think it's natural for someone that doesn't know very many people in the trans community to be a little fearful and make assumptions about the unknown. Like, it just, it is what it is. And even being exposed to a lot of queer things, like I think it's natural. A lot of people in transition, like they're afraid of like what will happen to like the looks that they've counted on, not because necessarily anything negative is going to happen, but because it's unknown. And like I think it's understandable, and I understand my mom's concerns in that, in coming from a space with much less knowledge of these issues. But she also talked about, she was like, because I was like, I've like done pretty well for myself, like even, you know, people aren't put off by this. And she was like, I just wonder like how many internships you would have gotten, like that you didn't get because of the way you present. And it just, of course, like there's going to be people in interviews, people judge you on everything, and of course conservative people like aren't going to like, non-traditional gender presentations. But I just wish she could have come from a space more of being like, if people don't hire you, like that's their loss, and just been, and she is supportive, and I know she thinks highly of me in that regard, because she has these perspectives and fears. So, but basically I told her, I was like, the type of work that I'm trying to do and the type of views that I hold, and this comes across in like my intellectual pursuits and like the space that people want to be surrounded by, and a space that's going to be receptive to my academic and clinical agenda, will be environments that are receptive to queer things and are non-traditional in that sense. Like if I'm not going to get a position because of my gender presentation, I don't want that position. It sucks that the world's like that, but like for what I'm trying to do and what I feel like my goals are, you know, it really is important that I'm in a space that is progressive and receptive to that kind of thinking. Um, so, uh, visit with my mom was good actually to break the ice, because I hadn't seen her since we've been talking really seriously about all this transition stuff, and I think maybe it helped humanize things a little bit for her. But I'm still like really unsure what all is going to happen with that. A final thing I wanted to talk about, sorry I'm like speeding through this, is physical safety. And like even previous to starting testosterone, like just the way that I presented myself, like people do react sometimes and do feel threatened, and in turn can want to be threatening towards you or whatever it is. And like, this is more of a concern now moving further along um, with physical changes. And uh, I think I'm gonna get like a pepper spray to keep on my keychain. Like, you know, it's just like a fact of life, and I want to be safe. And I would encourage anyone else in a similar position to do the same thing. Um, but yeah, hopefully nothing too serious comes up with that. Um, but there have definitely been like incidents on the street that have made me frightened. So something to think about. Anyways, until next time.